Thank you. I'm Kim Hankins. I'm the Director of Recruiting and Staffing here at Job One. And today we have Ann Hochstein, who is our Chief Operating Officer. And we have Chelsea Flores, our Employee Resource Advocate. Rebecca Swank, our Director of Community Engagement. And today we're going to talk about neurodiversity and superpowers and kryptonite. So we will discuss neurodiversity and how does it relate to your work life. Today we want to be as interactive as possible. So we will ask you to participate in a couple of polls. We're going to break out into some groups to discuss neurodiversity in your workplace. And we also want to make sure we answer all your questions at the end of today's workshop. So our takeaway goals today, we want to make sure you know how do your business goals and culture benefit from neurodiversity. What does neurodiversity look like in a business environment, and what tools do you need? And how can you as a business avoid sabotaging a neurodiverse hire? And are you a cultural hire box checker? Neurodiversity works. We want to go over some real life success stories where Job One has helped different businesses implement their diverse and help diverse their culture. So please post any questions you have during the presentation in the chat section of Zoom, and we will consolidate those questions and have a Q&A at the end today. So first, we do have a poll question. Do you have a personal connection or know someone with a disability? You could answer that. We'll give a few seconds here. Still got some answers going. As you can see, it's a pretty overwhelming response. Most of us do have a personal connection or know someone with a disability. So a lot of this content will obviously be very relevant. And our next poll question: how many people in the United States have a disability? If you can answer your best answer there. Give you a few seconds. Looks like most of us got it right. It's answer A, 1 in 4. According to the CDC, 1 in 4 or 6 million Americans have a disability that impacts major life activities. And so you may know or not know of a specific employee in your workplace right now that may be impacted by a disability. A lot of disabilities, no time frame. They can happen at any time in someone's life. One of the most common disability types is mobility, which happens in about 1 in 7 adults, typically by age. However, today we're going to concentrate on a few diagnosis examples that are not as recognizable. Our next slide here. Sorry, my poll keeps popping up. So what is neurodiversity? It is making sure that those who may think, act, or learn differently are accepted for their strengths. It's very cognitive. Many who embrace neurodiversity look at those who have been diagnosed with a disability that is often a non-physical disability, and they see someone that has the ability to look at situations or problems with a different lens, and someone that can contribute information that may otherwise not have had the opportunity to be shared. For example, an employee who is diagnosed with autism may be viewed as socially odd or different, and this can automatically trigger a feeling or an action that the employee doesn't have the capability to contribute to traditional business standards. And so today we're going to focus on those strengths and try to change that. So neurodiversity and the benefits, fostering a neurodiversity culture can open up so many more ideas and solutions to businesses by making changes to, or in some cases, simply utilizing the resources that you already have. So today we're focusing on the strengths of some more common diagnoses. We have decided to focus on 4 that you may or may not have heard of. or experience in the workplace. We want to focus on the strengths that an employee could have from that. So our first is ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The folks that have been diagnosed with this typically are extraordinarily creative, resourceful, adaptive, tenacious, and resilient. And their ultimate superpower is their hyperfocus. Next is autism. Typically, those with autism are methodical, sophisticated. They have high analytical skills, attention to detail, and their superpower is that they are a steel trap for information. Next is dyspraxia. Often strategic problem solvers. They are often multi-talented creatively, and their superpower is code cracking skills. Lastly, we have trauma survivors, and they are typically, they have a strong survival instinct, they have grit, they thrive in uncertainty, they're adaptable, empathetic, and their superpower is their neuroception. And so now I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Chelsea Flores, who's going to talk to us about ADHD.
Hi, so yep, I'm Chelsea Flores. I'm the Employee Resource Advocate, licensed social worker and benefits specialist at Job One. And so we will start with ADHD. So let's start with just the very simplified DSM diagnosis. There's much more, as all diagnoses have many, many layers to it, but it's basically a persistent pattern of inattention and hyperactivity, impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development, as characterized by inattention or hyperactivity and impulsivity. So why does this matter to you? Well, 4 to 6% of your employees or coworkers have diagnosed or non-diagnosed ADHD. And of those, 85% don't know they have it, but will still tend to struggle with productivity and performance and reaching their full potential at work. So it's easy to make, and we've all heard a lot of assumptions about ADHD and those experiencing it. So we'd like to take this opportunity to check those assumptions. So first, we often think of ping-ponging thoughts for people with ADHD, but ping-ponging thoughts can actually help you devise unique solutions to really tricky problems that our neurotypical peers may miss. Being different can actually make people with ADHD more compassionate. They often find themselves rooting for the underdog and share compassion with those struggling. That's my favorite kind of team member. Most adults and children with ADHD have to work twice as hard to achieve the same task as a person with neurotypical. But the struggle isn't, this isn't always bad, because it obviously makes them more determined to try again until they succeed. They never give up. So in ADHD, this is my favorite one. ADHD doesn't always mean a lack of attention like we generally think. It actually can mean noticing and paying attention to everything. And that means that they do see things that people like us maybe miss. So what can we do? Here's a couple adjustments that you can think about to increase neurodiversity and support people with ADHD in your workplace. The first is to just take time to identify the specific strengths and symptoms of the person that you're working with. Every single person with ADHD has different strengths and different symptoms associated. So, for example, a way you could do this is to just acknowledge that even the time that you assign the task to your employee may be completely critical to them. It could mean the success or failure of that just based on when you assign it. Clearly define the task. So we all understand the stress of a not very clear assignment given to us from our bosses, but people experiencing ADHD are generally perfectionists. So if you give them gray area or let them question something, they may either ignore what was important or go further into something that you weren't expecting. So being very clear with the perimeter, the time constraints, and everything that you want will be lower the stress and get you what you want. One thing that you can do that's extremely helpful is adding like a limitations section or if I had more time section, and that will allow the person to kind of say, well, if I had more money, time, people, funding, this is what I would have done, and this is how I could have made it better. That will allow them to kind of finish the task, but still give you what they really wanted to give you, which is their perfectionist. So the last thing would be consider flexible scheduling. ADHD is often associated with tardiness, which is a problem. But although it's not an excuse, this is probably due to the sleep issues that are associated with this diagnosis. So knowing that their most productive hours are at night is going to help that employee succeed. It's like imagining, for neurotypical brains, it's the most productive time is pretty much from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., which fits right into our constraints of the 9 to 5. And can you imagine if we all switched to 5 p.m. to midnight, and how you might feel that's not really convenient for you. That's not your power hour. So to summarize, on the next slide, we have the superpower of ADHD is hyperfocus. It's their extraordinarily creative, resourceful, adaptive, tenacious, and resilient. So I will pass it now to Rebecca Swank to let you know about autism.
Thank you, Chelsea. As she said, I'm Rebecca Swank. I'm the Director of Community Engagement. So the autism spectrum disorder refers to a broad range of conditions characterized by challenges with social skills, repetitive behaviors, speech, and nonverbal communication. So autism is not a single condition, but rather a collection of disorders that fall on a spectrum, with each case ranging in terms of severity and symptoms. So autism affects the way that people learn, think, and problem solve. Some people with autism can be significantly challenged intellectually or in terms of their ability to focus or interact socially, but it can also make them extremely skilled and driven. These individuals are fully formed, complex, beautiful, interesting, and worthwhile. Typically, they have a tolerance of repetition and routine, which is valuable with many types of jobs. They have attention to detail, accuracy, and a memory for details, which can be astounding. They display strong logic and analytical skills. They have focus, are reliable, honest, and have a preference for work over office politics. For example, they may have trouble enthusiastically engaging in a conversation about the weather because everybody already knows what it feels like outside. So as a rule, they don't like to be dishonest. If a baby is ugly, and we know there are no ugly babies, but let's say there's an ugly baby, they will struggle to coo over it lovingly. So let's help them by providing clear expectations. Avoid using an implied meaning, instead use a clear, direct statement. So an example could be, maybe you're getting frustrated and say, are you going to work on the database assignment? Instead say, please begin your work on the database assignment. Or let's get lunch later. Instead, having a clear, direct statement of, please meet us in the cafeteria at 12 p.m. if you would like to eat lunch with us. Another tip would be to avoid any indirect pattern of speech, including cliches, implied meanings, and idioms. So an example could be, this assignment is going to give you a run for your money. Instead, try, this assignment is going to be challenging. This creates a clear expectation of what is to come. So what adjustments can we make to help? Sensory stimulation. While people on the spectrum can often exhibit a strong focus on one task at a time, they may experience an intolerance to distractions such as common office noises. So by reducing auditory, visual, and tactile distractions, that can make a huge difference. Some other individuals may display atypical body movements, but that can also disturb your coworkers. So one tip could be to use handheld squeeze balls or similar objects to provide sensory input or a calming effect. Working from home, many of us are working from home and it's working great. And if that is appropriate for that employee, that could be a solution, or finding a private workspace that allows the individual to move in a way that is comfortable for them without disturbing others. And then finally, stress management. We can all use this, can't we? Situations that create stress can vary from person to person, but could likely involve heavy workloads and unrealistic timeframes. And so by providing a positive reinforcement, modifying a work schedule, and providing sensitivity training for your workforce, you can make a world of difference. A key point that I'd like to highlight would be the supports that help individuals with autism in their adjustments to the workplace often provide clarity to all employees, such as establishing long-term and short-term goals for employees. So to recap, individuals with autism, they are methodical, they have sophisticated analytical skills and a great attention to detail. Their superpower is that they are a steel trap for information. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Ann Hochstein, Chief Operating Officer at Job One.
Hello, I'm excited to talk to you guys about dyspraxia today, which is also sometimes called developmental coordination disorder. This is a lesser known diagnosis in that oftentimes when people reach adulthood, they have learned many coping mechanisms to keep it hidden fairly well. I'm going to go over the definition here. It is a discrete motor disorder under the broader heading of other neurodevelopment disorders. Its acquisition and execution of coordinated motor skills are below what would be expected at a given age and the opportunity to have learned a skill. So this might look like clumsiness, slowness, or inaccuracy in doing different motor skills. So in childhood, that often looks like kids who really have a rough time playing sports, using scissors. But some of the handwriting and speech difficulties follow people into adulthood. So then in the workplace, you might see this as someone who really struggles to take notes in a meeting, or who just has really terrible handwriting, or even who may still struggle with some speech. The motor skills deficits cannot be better explained by intellectual disability or other visual impairment, nor are they because of a neurological condition like cerebral palsy or muscular dystrophy, etc. So it's very prevalent. It's believed to affect 5 to 6% of the population, but with different degrees of impact. And again, what makes this one unusual is that it is something that is people are able to hide, except for maybe when they are under stress. So, let's see. So let's check some assumptions. Persistence, determination, and hard work are all characteristics associated with this, which makes them valuable employees. Poor handwriting skills are due to weak fine motor strength and coordination. So this often leads to a preference for using technology even throughout their life, which means typically these individuals have strong technical skills and problem-solving skills, as they've always had to work to find creative solutions to get things done. They also always will carry the fatigue from doing physical activities is something that stays with individuals into adulthood as well. So things, carrying out physical tasks is just harder for these individuals. So they get tired easier, which means they likely will find their way into fields that allow them to use their creative minds rather than their bodies for their employment. And creativity is one of their superpowers. So what adjustments can be made? If you find that someone in your workplace is struggling with some of these issues, it often is going to show up under stress, or if someone's being required to learn new skills, or is working in a more challenging environment. Maybe it's noisy and the sensory is high. Then they might need more support. So some things that can be easily done would be to, maybe rearrange the workspace, allowing someone to record meetings so that they don't have to take notes is something that can be very helpful. Some special scissors or office equipment, things like that, that just make some of the things that could be barriers less so. To recap, so strategic problem solving skills, often multi-talented, creatively, and then their superpower is their code cracking abilities, always trying to find a solution. So with that, I will give it back to Kim Hankins.
Thanks, Anne. So we're going to talk about trauma survivors, and trauma is very unique in the fact that it can happen anywhere at any time in a person's life. A person can experience trauma and outside forces can trigger, excuse me, the past event or events. So the behaviors can result in extreme fear, anxiety, depression, flashbacks. There are different types of trauma. Single events can be in the past or very recent past. Many industries may have an employee experience trauma on the job. It could be a horrific accident or death on the job, an active shooter, or anything that is deeply significant that has happened to the employee. Multiple events or prolonged trauma is when the individual has been exposed over their lifetime since childhood. It can be abuse, neglect, bullying, exposure to any unhealthy environment can contribute to this. The science and physiology of trauma lies in the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the cortex part of the brain. The hippocampus helps with our memory and our spatial navigation. The amygdala helps us process our emotions. The cortex processes our complex cognitive behaviors and how our personality is expressed. It's how we process our social behaviors. A trigger reaction can cause a biological alarm that causes the body to react in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. The brain over time can adapt to these situations if the proper diagnosis and help is not provided. It can lead to some unhealthy coping mechanisms. So contrary to typical assumptions about trauma survivors, trauma survivors have a very powerful neuroception. And our neuroception is our social engagement system that helps us navigate relationships and our fight, flight, and freeze responses. Trauma survivors know that connections and communication is very important. Work-life balance is very important, practicing healthy self-care. Trauma survivors have been empowered. They have developed good coping skills and mechanisms to self-advocate and have the confidence to control their lives. Some adjustments, business may not need to do a lot of adjustments if they already have many resources in place. They may just need to promote those resources. Trauma can happen on the job. So make those resources that come with your health insurance provider easy, or HR department. Make sure that if a traumatic event does happen in the workplace, make sure your employees are okay. The World Health Organization put it into an economic statement stating that for every US dollar put into scaled up treatment for common mental health issues, there's a return of $4 in improved health and productivity. So invest in your people and make sure they're okay, and it makes a difference. Your culture matters. Psychological safety. Make sure that your management is trained to listen and to hear feedback, and make sure that employees can promote and feel safe in a culture of sharing. And change your mindset. Traumatic stress is a normal reaction to abnormal situations. And again, trauma survivors, they have strong survival skills, instincts, they have grit, they thrive in uncertainty, they're adaptable and empathetic, but their overall superpower is their neuroception. So now I'm gonna throw it back to Chelsea, who's gonna talk about our increasing neurodiversity.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. So what can we do now? So we've shared a lot of ways already to increase neurodiversity in your workplace, but the key thing in your toolbox to take away from this presentation would be strengths. Please think of identifying strengths. Many organizations focus on improving individuals' weaknesses and ignoring what they do well. And one theory trying to change that is called positive psychology. And it's the change in focus from trying to fix what's wrong with an individual to capitalizing on the best the individual may offer. So we'll go to the next slide. So here on the next slide, there's a couple strengths listed here. There's a lot of ways to identify strengths with your employees. First and foremost, having conversations with them, them being able to self-identify strengths is a good start. There's also assessment tools, and the charts you're looking at here are from one of those assessment tools, and we'll provide the link to this. Make sure when you choose one, it's evidence-based. There's a lot of, tests out there, but make sure it's a good one. We'll provide this. One that I like to spotlight is this strength of woo. It's the very last one on this box, and it says, love the challenge of meeting new people and winning them over. And that really hits home with me because I know a couple people that is their strength, and I know a lot more people that is their nightmare. So making sure that your employees are using their strengths is very essential to the productivity, I guess, of that. You want somebody who wants to meet somebody out there representing your company. So using these strengths, you can increase neurodiversity through redesigning work, job crafting, eliminating duties, role innovation, cross-training, changing positions. Idiosyncratic deals is when your employee is almost screaming their strengths at you. It's when you find an employee is coming to you and offering to do certain tasks that are outside of their job description. That's because they're identifying their own strengths. So, but also we will have more on this information. I really encourage you to dig deeper into this. We'll have the link to our blog post that's associated with this webinar at the end of this presentation, and you can find it on Job One's website as well.
All right, well, so the next thing we're going to do is to go into a breakout session. We would like, well, we have these two questions. What are the challenges with hiring an individual with known disabilities? And can you share any successes your company may have had with neurodiverse hires? But one thing I would encourage you to really think about in your conversations is, if you're here today, you're here because this topic interests you. It's something that is important to you or to your organization. So how do you take it the next step? How do you go from having good intentions to beyond, because I know for all of us, it's easy to say, well, I took the seminar, but then, you kind of check the box and then what's next? So that's kind of where I hope you guys can take your conversations in the breakout is, what works, what doesn't work, what are some real solutions that then we can come back to this larger group and share some solutions. So see you in a little bit.
We had a great discussion in our breakout group. And so what I'm going to do is ask that if you can share what you guys talked about in your groups. I'll go ahead and kick off what we had a small group, but we talked a lot about, we had some really good questions on hiring individuals with disabilities, and we really dove into the terminology like neurotypical, or really just basically having conversations and being honest. I expressed to our group that, it's good to ask questions. It's a safe space, and our organization, and that's why we're here, is to make sure that employers and managers can ask those questions, if they don't understand neurodiversity or adults with developmental disabilities. We also, talked about, one thing we talked about was like, what age can adults start in the workplace? Well, we actually start with high school juniors in a summer work experience program, and we're going to go over some examples there. We also talked about, different trainings you can do. We just a lot of it is just communication and asking questions and having that psychological safety to ask those questions. And let's see how, if we want to do, I guess, Anne, do you want to go next with your group?
Yeah, I'm actually going to have Christine share. That's okay, Christine? Because she has a success story that's happened at her business.
I don't know. Do we need to?
Oh, yeah, we can unmute her. Oh, she's muted. There she goes.
I've lost. Am I unmuted? Sorry.
Yep, you're good.
Okay.
Oh, now you're muted.
I'm hitting unmute. I hope
you're good
it's
now.
saying
You're
that.
good now.
Okay.
There you go.
So I know it's tough with big presentations because there's kind of a default to mute. Anyway, I work for a very progressive company. First Business Bank does a fantastic job in terms of promoting diversity and employment in all aspects. And both our branch, our headquarters in Madison, Wisconsin, and here in Leawood, in the Kansas City area, we have key employees that are disabled, that are very important parts of our team. The young man that works here in Leawood is disabled, slightly physically, intellectually disabled. He is a fantastic, has so many great talents and abilities and brings so much to our team. And he's really a big part of what holds the team together. I mean, he's touches everybody's lives in the office, and it's just been a wonderful thing. And I think it's good, not just for business, but you know, it's good in so many ways. And I guess not just to help say, oh, well, we feel like we're helping this person. It helps our business. It helps us be a better business.
Thank
so
you.
That's my success story.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And part of what Job One seeks to do when we're working with our clients and with businesses is to make those kind of connections and matches so that the business also feels like that, you know, when we're working with an individual with a disability to find a job, that that the end result is they have a job that they love and the business feels like they had their needs met as well, that it's a partnership. So I think that's a really great example of that. I guess with that, Chelsea, do you want to share from your group?
I'll give a brief little, we talked about a lot of like adjustments that can be made and supports, and the open-mindedness of the staff that support, and how a good manager can make all of the difference. I'm trying to think of what else. We talked about, you know, the traditional workplace structure is something that might be holding us back, and we need to, when somebody, you know, we're thinking about, for example, working from home for somebody. I know there's a lot of people that we kind of talked about this, that it's hard and there's a lot of push for everyone to get back and put their butts in the seat, is what we said. And why? And kind of just asking why, and whose preference is that on. And so, and then we did have a really great success story that if Spencer would like to share, that would be great.
Sure, yeah. As a person with a disability, I am autistic. I had a manager that was actually really, really receptive whenever I approached with concerns. Instead of just focusing on issues I was having completing certain tasks, there was talk about, well, what can we do to actually that would be better, that would be more you know, inclusive and accessible for you. And having documentation written down really, really helped. Not only having it written down, but also having it consistent and updated. I've been at other positions where they've had documentation, but it's been weeks, months, even years out of date.
Sure. It's awful.
Sorry about that. So, but yeah, it's extremely important to have it updated, to keep it consistent, because you can have documentation, but if it's not up to date, you're not helping your employees with that. You're just basically giving them kind of a speed bump to go over as they try to get through their workday. So that helped a lot. It was extremely important, and I haven't really had a manager like that since. So it's pretty rare, and that only increases the importance of that.
Yeah, and he shared that that documenting aspect ended up helping everyone after just.
Yes.
Yep.
That's wonderful.
And Rebecca, do you have your group, or do you have someone?
Yes. So Kim Guile is going to be kind of share what our group talked about.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Hi, Kim. We met at, I think, like the first diversity luncheon series last year. So full circle, right? So our group talked about the struggle that we have as managers and employers of making sure that we're recruiting in a way that people who are from all aspects of diversity, whether or not these people are actually seeing job descriptions and seeing opportunities and actually going through the process of being able to apply for things. So making sure that we go out and about and do a better job of actively recruiting. We also talked about our job descriptions and how, what's in them, what is actually required. Like, is a master's degree really required for something? And understanding that a master's degree, there's a huge barrier to entry there. It's very expensive, it's very time consuming, and it may actually not add a lot of meaningful value to the work that people can be able to do. So asking those hard questions and questioning that conventional wisdom about what goes into a job description and what's required or not. We also talked about we as employers want to be able to provide support and celebrate the diversity that we have on our teams. But there's also the fact that a lot of people who are diverse are also fall into protected classes, which sometimes can put employers in a weird place where, you know, you want to celebrate, you want to, you know, shout from the rooftops about all the different superpowers that are on the teams. And sometimes those superpowers are seen and sometimes those superpowers are unseen. And it makes it challenging to be able to celebrate when you don't necessarily know whether or not someone may have a disability, or someone might not want to reveal that they have a disability, or, you know, it's just an odd place to be in, especially with unseen situations. What did I miss, Rebecca?
I think you've covered everything. That was great. Yeah. And then of course we talked about the way that we can be working from home and to support those with disabilities, and do they have to go into the office? And so we kind of expanded on that a little bit more, that transportation could be an issue. So excellent recap.
All right, so now if it'll let me change, there we go. All right, so, and I think Anne, are you gonna go over some of our success stories that we've had at Job One?
So yeah, I'm gonna just go through a few stories. This first one here, I know, I don't remember, one of us referenced the summer work program. So this is an example story from one of our summer work sites this past summer, Casey Coffee Roasters. What that program does is it allows students who are going into their senior year to have a work experience at a normal, regular business. It feels like a normal summer job. So in this case, they were working at Casey Coffee Roasters, roasting the coffee, working in the shop, doing those kind of typical coffee things. But the reason we thought this story was interesting to share was because not only did these 3 kids that work there have a really great experience, but one of the young men, the owner found out over the course of the summer, has a real ability for creating YouTube and doing things through with video, with putting things together that way. So he had actually created an ad for her that she was able to use on her social media platforms for her business. And that was something that, I mean, nobody knew that was a skill that he had going into it. We were all thinking, oh, this is just a great summer work experience like every teenager gets. But because she was open to and really got to know these students, she was able to tap into his other ability that really benefited her business even more than, you know, just having the help that she needed to get the coffee roasted. So anyway, I love that story, and just a great group of kids anyway. Let's see. So this next one, and again, it's a business really taking the time to get to know their employee. Mark actually had worked for Job One in one of our packaging and assembly programs for a long time. And he was hired at Christian Brothers. He wanted to find a job in the community. He was hired at Christian Brothers Automotives, and they hired him with the expectation that he would be, you know, cleaning up, sweeping up, emptying out trash cans, kind of doing whatever was needed. They knew that he loved cars, so there was an interest there, and he wanted to work there. But as they got to know him, they have actually started teaching him, and he is able to change oil and do much more than what they had originally hired him to do. And again, Mark is able to you know, have a job that he cares about and that he likes. So another great one. So this is Stephen, and he actually another person who worked for Job One in our more traditional work settings for a long time. He recently got hired as a call center representative and has been promoted, has gotten a raise, is doing really great. But a couple weeks ago, we ran into, he was starting to talk to us his employment specialist about, well, I might have to quit because when the weather gets bad, it's hard. He has a truck that he drives that's been equipped for him. But when the weather's bad, it's not always possible for him to get out. You know, sidewalks haven't been shoveled, all the things that get in the way. And his employment specialist was able to help him talk to the business and explain some of those difficulties. And they're actually going to transition him to be working from home starting in October. So he'll be able to, because again, great example of the job he's doing can be done remotely. Just sometimes all of our constructs get in the way of what we think is possible. So we're super excited for Stephen. He's super excited. He was really excited to get to have his story shared today. And then one last summer work example. This is another, this Extreme Gymnastics was another business that partnered with us for this summer and gave a group of kids that opportunity for a first job. And I think same, you know, it was one of those where they knew they were going to have a lot of cleaning things that they needed help with because of COVID and thought this would be a good deal. But as the summer went on, the kids got new and different responsibilities because the business realized that these kids had so many more capabilities and brought so much more to their business than what they even realized. So there's just a few highlights. And then of course you can always go, we have success stories on our website if you want to go feel good, read lots of happy stories. So with that, I think we're ready if there's questions.
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions actually. Let's see. So one of the questions is, what are some of the key words or catchphrases to include in job descriptions that can help attract neurodiversity?
I think,
yeah, go ahead, Anne.
you take it. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think Kim Guile had actually talked about, really looking at your job description and is this just something that we've always used, and we just keep using it over and over again and doing maybe a little audit on that and just seeing, are we providing large print for that option for the job description, or are we addressing accessibility issues, really doing a pretty deep audit with the lens of neurodiversity or any diversity, and just making sure that making it accessible to a lot of your employers.
Well, and I would add to that, going back to the some of the slides when we were talking about the strengths that because I've seen job postings where the tone is positive, where it says the person we're looking for, and it talks about those strengths that they're seeking instead of it just being a checklist of things that people can do. Because that, I think, we can all post jobs that way, where we think about, okay, what we really want is a team player. We want someone who's punctual. We want someone, if those are really the values that the organization is seeking, to the point about all the rest of it can be trained, to make sure that that's how our job descriptions read, that they're not must lift 50 pounds, has to have a driver's license, must have a bachelor's degree. If those things aren't deal breakers, then they shouldn't be on the job description. So yeah. I just think that's my 2 cents on how you can make it more inclusive.
I was going to just add that my personal story is that I almost didn't apply for this job right now because I am experiencing visual impairment and it required a license. And I think we've looked at that now, and it really does have a huge impact on the people that could potentially apply. And some of those sentences, they're really relevant to your job and your culture and your life.
Well, I really appreciate Chelsea sharing that story, because one of the questions was did any of our presenters have a disability that they were comfortable talking about? So really appreciate Chelsea talking about that. But here's another good question, is how do you get team members to focus on appreciating the positive benefits and advantages of a neurodiverse hire instead of needs and accommodations, which can usually be viewed as negative?
I think, Anne, maybe do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to training for sure. You know, if that's not something that your organization has spent time talking about or training around, it's easy. You know, frontline, we did talk about this in our breakout. You know, frontline managers they have a job to get done. And so it's easy sometimes to, if you don't have buy-in at that level of your organization, to have it be hard. I mean, even if you're, you know, at the top, at your HR department, everybody's bought in, but then you get the person who's ultimately going to decide to make the hire and who the person's going to work for isn't bought in, then we see those situations fall apart when we're doing in the course of our work. So training, you know, and also just, you know, if that's something that is important to your organization, then it might be a culture shift, and that's okay. You know, it's okay to say, you know, this isn't something we've been good at, but it's important to us. And so we're going to do the things that we have to do as far as training and talking about from, you know, at the top, having your leadership be talking about that this is something that's important. Because without that, it's really, I mean, it is frontline managers, direct staff, they have a job to get done. And so they have to understand what's in it for them, I think.
Yeah. How does this fit in with ADA?
Oh, good question. So, let me first say, I think that's such a great question, because ADA has changed all of our workplaces and it's changed the world, right? Because the first focus on having spaces be physically accessible has led us now to being able to have these conversations about other kinds of disabilities that are invisible, but that are that before we weren't ready for that. So ADA does talk about the physical limitations. They are what move things forward, so that people who are in wheelchairs, who have other kinds of physical limitations, that progress has moved forward. If you think about what a short time it's been since that legislation actually was enacted, it's really amazing. So what you're seeing now is this kind of next step in that, where, because that opened the door to people realizing that someone who was in a wheelchair probably didn't have anything else that kept them from doing the job other than they couldn't get in the building, to us now saying, well, okay, so this person maybe needs to record meetings or needs a different schedule, but if I can do those things, then they can provide all these other gifts that they have to our organization. And so they are related in that it's part of the progress of including everyone in our workplaces, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then I think I'd like to talk a little bit more. We talked this in our group. Kim talked about neurotypical, and that was sort of a word that the group had, at least myself and a couple of the other members, had never heard before. Could you speak a little bit more for the entire group about that?
Yeah, sure. On neuro, so it's, we talked about kind of like safe language, safe questions, and and I think it's good to ask questions, and that's how we learn. And going kind of back to your last question, I think the education piece is huge. And, these success stories that we share, Greg had a good question about how do we hire differently? And I think it's putting yourself, reaching out to organizations like us to maybe see what clients we have that may fulfill your job description, having us come in and talk to train managers, and just education is a big piece of it. And asking questions, what's safe language to use? We even talked about the word handicap. Is that okay? Is it not okay? And I think and that's what I think we try to promote as a culture, is that it's okay to not know, ask those questions, and, we all together can work and educate everyone together. So.
Everyone's different. that's the main thing too. There are people that they prefer to be called certain ways. Like some people may say like, I'm disabled, and some people may find that very offensive for you to use. So, you know, it's just about asking and being, like Kim said, open to change.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Well, this has been really an eye-opener for me, even as a person who works in the D&I space almost on a daily basis. When I first heard the term neurodiversity, it blew my mind because I had never heard it before. And thank you, Kim, who connected us with Job One, and I'm so glad that we did. I really want to recommend that we do this session again at a later time, because I think this kind of information needs to be heard by a lot of our members, especially when we get back to normal with that, whatever that means later on. We're you know, the need for employees is going to be so great. We're really optimistic that we're going to get back to our regular economy. So I'd love to invite you guys back at some point next year and to add you to our lineup again, because I thought this was fantastic. So with that, we'd like to thank everybody for joining in. This was part of our diversity and inclusion workshop series, where we have our last one on November 24th. And we'll focus on demystifying disabilities in the workplace. So with that, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Please reach out to Job One if you have any additional questions, or if you would like to work with them as a group. As you can see, they're very knowledgeable. They know this stuff in and out, and they're just fantastic people to work with. We hope everybody has a great week, and we hope to see you guys again soon. On behalf of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.